Until you talk about it, until you open yourself up to have that conversation, people are not really going to be comfortable to just outright say it. And so that's where I was just like, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and talk to my friends about this. I'm going to out loud say, like, are you dealing with this at work? Or have you been struggling with like the next level? Have you been struggling with like really building authentic relationships? Do you have a sponsor? And these questions, when you are actually honest and you make yourself vulnerable, I've seen that other people are comfortable being vulnerable as well, because you had to start it first. You had to open the door first and really be the human in allowing them to know, like, okay, I'm not the only one.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Media Moments. I'm your host, Ahis, and today I'm really excited to be joined by Dabney Weathersby. So me and Dabney go way back. We actually worked on the same floor at Goldman Sachs, I think around 2014 through 2017, at least that's when we overlapped. And it was at Goldman Sachs, we both decided to go to business school and get our A's. And I remember we spent a lot of hours studying for the GMATs, or I should say suffering for the GMATs. But all that time paid off, because we eventually both got our MBAs. And we also both went to Kellogg School of Management. I graduated in 2019 while I graduated in 2020. So Dabney is currently a strategy and operations leader based in Chicago and the creator of Let's Circle Back, a platform built for Black professionals and women navigating the intersections of work, culture, and identity. So in this episode, and especially in the spirit of Black History Month, so we're recording in February of 2026, we'll explore Dabney's roots, the intersection of the immigrant and Black experience, how and why she chose to use her voice publicly with her platform, and how professionals can think more intentionally today about how to use their voices, especially at work. But before we get started, a quick disclaimer. So the views and opinions we share today are our own and do not reflect the views of our employers, whether past or present. So with that said, Dabney, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. He's so excited to be here.
Thanks for coming. And as I mentioned, we go way back when. But before we go into Let's Circle Back, talk about some of your upbringing and your background, I think in the spirit of Black History Month, I want to start with some history. So as you think about the civil rights movement and just Black history in general, is there any leader that from the civil rights movement whose journey or leadership you identify with the most, and why?
Yes, that's a great question. And in the spirit of how you started my amazing intro, someone who was able to really use their voice more fearlessly. And I live in Chicago, Ida B. Wells. I've always been extremely attracted to her leadership, especially since at the time where it was very dangerous to use your voice, like she was very fearless in using her skills and her voice to really ensure that people didn't just hear, right? Like didn't just hear about the horrors happening to Black Americans at the time in terms of lynching, but that they actually saw it. And like she was one of the first people to actually publicize that. And that was very dangerous, right? Like she was definitely using her voice in such a way that could have been very detrimental to her. And if you think about it, right, if she was not fearless or strong enough to say it at the time, not saying that we wouldn't have known what the atrocities were, it probably would have just taken longer. And so I look at leadership like that, like people who understand that the stakes are high, that their voice, though, at the time is not needed to be muted. There are times when you have to be fearless in being able to use your voice and being able to say what's wrong, what's right, and allowing people to actually see what the changes are, see what the impacts are, whether or not that's something that can be detrimental to you, your career, but just being able to have and be that legendary leader. And Ida B. Wells is absolutely who I think about, especially as I navigate my own voice in a much more calmer perspective, but of course, in a different space that we are in now.
I guess I could kind of see the connection with what you're trying to do with Let's Circle Back, having that confidence to use your voice in those sort of public spaces. So how did she, obviously now we have LinkedIn, we got Twitter, we got all kinds of stuff at our disposal. In her time, how, for people who are not very familiar with her work, how did she specifically use her voice, or in what types of medium she used to get the word out about those atrocities that were happening at the time?
Yeah, so Ida B. Wells was a journalist, right? And so when she knew about her own friends who were lynched, we would probably in moments of grief kind of grieve, right? And just kind of succumb to the idea that it is potentially over, your relationship with your significant. But what she did was publicize that, right? Like put it in newspapers. She co-founded the NAACP. There were more that she knew needed to be done, where it's not just that we hear about it, because when you hear about things, right, information can certainly change. But like visually, how does this impact you when you actually see that this is happening right now, and actually creating mediums where people can discuss and talk about it? Because I think at the time, of course, people were fearful to talk about these things just because they were the minority. And at any time, this can happen to you. It could have happened to her, right? So for you to know that this happened to your friends and that this is an atrocity happening now, but still being brave, and a woman, right? Being a brave Black woman to use your skills in storytelling, in journaling, in data, right? To bring this to life, of course, is what I completely admire, because when the stakes are as high as that and you're still very brave to do so, that's something that should continue to have your name being said years down the line.
She was one of the co-founders of the NAACP?
Yes.
Oh, I did not know that. So we just learned some history in Black History Month. So thank you. Dan. Before I go to my next question, just in terms of history, I like how you connected it to Chicago. And I was thinking about this question myself. So we live in Atlanta. And for me, I think John Lewis is that kind of person. So I think about his whole thing was this good trouble. Goodness, that was one of his most famous quotes. And for people who don't know, he was a congressman for Georgia for probably 30 years, and he passed away in 2020, actually during the COVID time. But Atlanta does have a very sort of special place in the whole civil rights movement. Like MLK obviously was based out of here. John Lewis is based out of here, and a lot of people were based out of here. And obviously a lot of the HBCUs are also based out of here. Spelman, Morehouse. I was looking at that list. I think like 10 of them or so, all in the Atlanta, Georgia area. So just living here, I think for me, I feel fortunate to hopefully have my kids grow and learn about that heritage from that time that has such enormous impact in the life and so many things that we enjoy today, whether it's Black Americans or even as immigrants in America today. So let's move on to your story and your history. You were born in Brooklyn and you came from a Haitian background. So I want to understand, how did that environment, how did you navigate that environment of that sort of dual identity, on one hand, the Haitian roots, and also like growing up as a first generation American in Brooklyn, New York?
I think you hit on a lot of points where I think later on is where I realized like identity for me threefold, right? Being a woman, being Black, and also being first gen. And those are three strong identities, especially living in a place like Brooklyn, where there's a lot of hustle. It's a hustle culture. And I think it was built that way because there's a lot of immigrants there, right? Like you have, a lot of your small businesses being run by immigrants. You have your bakeries, your nail salons,
The bodegas.
your bodegas. It's very much hustle culture, and that's where you kind of understand the importance of resilience, because you have your parents, and more specifically, like with me being Haitian, like you have parents who came from another country and literally were brave enough to start all over again in a whole new country, down to learning a whole new language, right? And so doing that with a family in tow. So like, how do you then start over and ensure that your children have the best experience possible as children, but still succeed in another country? And it's just being in Brooklyn and the people who are around me. I don't think I ever really met folks who were my age who were not children of immigrants. And so then we all were pretty much born with this level of resiliency, because it's just like, here's what our parents did with the little resources that they had. And therefore our expectation is to then be excellent, right? Because
no other option. That's the one option.
we've done this much with this little resource, and therefore you have now all the resources available. We expect you to be excellent. And so how that's really helped me navigate across those three, I think it really provides the proof point in that this is everything I'm going for is absolutely something that I deserve. Everything that I'm going for, I know that I'm absolutely able to do because of the experience that I've had, and navigating those three identities, which I think really taught me about, grit, resilience, and what success looks like, because I've watched my parents and I've watched other immigrant families do so, and watching how hard they're working. I've always looked at it as like, there's no real reason why I can't work as hard or even harder to get the same thing, because they did it in like less time. and with less resources. Much respect, but there is a lot for us to do because of the sacrifices that they were able to make.
As you talk about your story, that song just kind of came to my mind. Concrete jungle where dreams were made of. And even for me, in my story, I am the immigrant, right? I have kids who are first gen. And like coming here and like some of those things that we like in Nigeria and in a lot of places around the world, sometimes like how you do or how you succeed, it's not just based on how hard you work. Like if you don't have like political connections, you don't have any number of things. So you could be the best in your class in like college or go get an MBA or whatever degree that you want to get and still not amount to anything. And so for a lot of people who come here, we come here for the opportunity. And then you get here, it's like, I'm here now. Like there is no other option. For me, the thing I always hope for is that my kids obviously don't have the same challenges that I had, or they didn't see that side of it. So for me, I always think about like how to help them understand like all the stuff we enjoy or we have, it's not necessarily given. Not everybody, like I didn't come from, not just me, my wife as well, we didn't come from some of the things that they enjoy, from privilege that they enjoy now. And hopefully we can instill that discipline for them to carry on.
And I think they will, right? Because of it's the sheer story that you're bringing up, right? And
I like
just
that.
how proud that they would be that you have done all this, right? You and your wife being as successful as you are. I think that what also is an element that's important to understand for the first gen, and me speaking as a first gen, is then when you go off into the real world, there are different challenges, right? Like you as an immigrant already expect your kids to be excellent. You expect them to be great. And that's what they will, of course, always strive for. But then going into the real world is not just being excellent because they will be, it's being seen as that too. I have to prove to everybody else that I'm excellent too. That is what the navigation for for someone who is first gen is currently dealing with, because it's just a different experience. You had to work hard, you got it, and you're working towards that. But then we have to be seen too, because of course there are those different types of politics to get you elevated the way that you'd want to.
Yeah, my wife always say this about like not letting their lights dim because the one that you mentioned, like once you go out there, it's a whole other world. The challenges are very tough, and obviously there's a lot of forces and people are trying to dim your light. So it's our job to tell them how great they are, to shine the light. So when they go out there, they have that self-belief. They don't have to like, oh, okay, this person said this about me, so I'm less than, or I'm this. And today we want to talk about some of those challenges and how we can make our light shine through all of that challenges. Sure. But before we talk about, let's circle back. One of my key questions is usually if there is a moment in your upbringing where you realize the power of your voice.
It happened a little later than I thought. It was probably maybe just like a year ago, where I kind of just felt like I was operating in isolation. And, as I said before, right, you as an individual, especially you as a first gen, you are essentially trained. And let's say I'm the firstborn. Okay. So I am under.
Okay. All right. I'm a firstborn as well. So I totally understand the challenges that comes with that.
You are literally trained as firstborn, first gen to really you should be the one that is successful. You are the one that we will bring back home. And so a lot of pressure, of course, in ensuring that like in everything I touch where I go is excellent. I am succeeding in all aspects. And that, of course, is not the case. Like not everyone is succeeding in every place, but just understanding that like there are kind of shortfalls. What I noticed though, because as I said before, navigating those three identities, being Black, being a woman, being first gen in corporate is a very different experience than I would imagine for other groups as you're trying to navigate, build relationships, succeed, climb up the ladder. And so I kept a lot of my experiences to myself and would kind of just like sat there in isolation because I just felt like maybe it was just me. It was exhausting trying to navigate some of these spaces and not feeling comfortable in asking other people or talking to even friends who probably had the same experience, but we just didn't talk about that. And I think that's what a lot of us do. If you talk about certain situations or maybe somewhere where you were not as great or something that you've experienced that you don't really know how to interpret, it probably signals, if you're saying it out loud, that like you're admitting to some level of weakness. And it's not that. It's the fact that you're having a shared experience. And it is shared. But until you talk about it, until you open yourself up to have that conversation, people are not really going to be comfortable to just outright say it. And so that's where I was just like, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and talk to my friends about this. I'm going to out loud say, like, are you dealing with this at work? Or have you been struggling with like the next level? Have you been struggling with like really building authentic relationships? Do you have a sponsor? And these questions, when you are actually honest and you make yourself vulnerable, I've seen that other people are comfortable being vulnerable as well because you had to start it first. You had to open the door first and really be the human in allowing them to know, like, okay, I'm not the only one. And so when we talk about like an unmuted moment, like it's less like it was one time, but it was just like, oh, this here, I've noticed that we're all silencing ourselves. And when we don't talk about it is when we give the situation or that experience more power because we honestly don't know how to navigate it. And having that community is important because then you have a shared space to actually bounce perspective or actually understand like what should be the next step. It allowed me to know that this is something that I don't have to go through alone, but not just me now, it's people that I know, people that I've talked to, my friends, my colleagues, who now have a safe space to have that conversation too.
It's very interesting that you mentioned like this happened for you very recently. And in some ways, I think it's the same for me. As I think about even for just in terms of like my social media presence, LinkedIn, TikTok, whatever else I do now, and some of the mentoring that I do now, even with the podcast and all this stuff, it really came together within the last 2 years. After business school, after a few years at Google. And it was this similar idea. Like, hey, like there's all these things that I've been feeling. I know probably people are going through it too, but no one is just saying it. So I do think there is a lane for people who feel comfortable sharing those vulnerable moments, some of those things that's not going well for them. I do feel like there is a lane for you to have a voice, and because that's something that people are yearning for. And another thing that you mentioned, this whole idea of giving people the permission to go second, sounds like that's what your platform is doing. Sometimes everyone is feeling something similar, whether it's like I'm not getting promoted or I'm having a hard time with my manager or whatnot. But when you don't say it, everyone feels the same thing. But if nobody says it, no one says it. Once one person says it, then everyone like, yes, me too.
You need that
Right?
person to open the door to allow you to feel like, oh, I'm not the only one. Because the only one, feeling like you're the only one,
yeah.
just allows you to feel like you are inadequate. And
Exactly.
that's
Yeah.
never the case.
Yeah, there's rarely a situation where you're the only one feeling what you're feeling. But it does take some courage to actually like get to a point where you can voice it out and be able to connect to people who are feeling the same thing. All right, so I think that's a good way to connect us to let's circle back. So a couple of things that I want to know. One, just tell us what it is. Two, why did you start it? And three, what do you hope to achieve with that platform?
So Let's Circle Black is my community-based platform.
Wait, so hold on. So did I get it right? Is it Let's Circle Back or Let's Circle Black?
Let's circle black because when you
Okay.
don't say like at work, let's circle back on this, but then
Yeah.
I did a play on words, let's circle black so that we can circle back on the black
Oh,
experience.
my bad. When I did your intro, I actually said Let's Circle Back.
It's
Because
all
when I was prepping for the show, in my notes, I had Let's Circle Black. Then right before this, I'm like, is there a typo? Maybe it's a typo. So I changed the Let's Circle Back. It's Let's Circle Black. Okay.
So, Let's Go Black is a community-based platform really focused on, highlighting and amplifying the Black experience in the workplace, doing this through data, insights, and strong storytelling. What I want to make sure with Let's Circle Black is that we're not just talking about problems, right? We're documenting patterns, we're sharing lived experiences, and really trying to use that information to create real change. Above that, my background before I used to work in VC, and of course, what we know with VC, there's not a lot of investment in Black entrepreneurship. And so what I want to do is continue to like elevate our Black founders by really setting them up for success with the data they need to really like successfully launch products, market to the right audience. Too often there's just Black entrepreneurs that's really building in the dark without insights or resources that other founders may get handed to them. What pushed me to start it, I think what I had brought up before, right? The realization I had about community, that we are all really experiencing the same things but in isolation. And I really wanted to create a space where we stop suffering quietly and really start building together. So where can we all talk about the Black experience where it's not just acknowledged, but it's just like truly centered? We're all talking about this experience. Where can we find our mentorship? Where can we really voice our concerns? What is normal and what is not? Where we can really use our collective knowledge to, prepare each other for what we actually want. And what we want is equity and opportunity. Those are the two things that we're grounded on. Equity and opportunity is very important that we ensure that we are able to get. And so Let's Circle Black is everything that but like everything that we've lived through and really turning that into a blueprint for the success that we all are working hard for, but also really deserve.
So let's make it more tangible. So in terms of, I see some of what you say on Threads, LinkedIn, and also like the newsletter as well. So just for people who want to tangibly understand your platform, how can people interact with us? Is it more the newsletter? Like just give someone a picture of how they can interact or how they can join such a community.
Absolutely. So there's several ways. But first is where you can connect with me on LinkedIn and chat about some of these things. However, I do have a Substack where that's where I share real stories about my experience or experiences that I have with friends and really just like highlight those, talk about those stories and give recommendations, right? How do you really navigate that? You're trying to climb the corporate ladder. You're trying to fight biases and stereotypes. You want to build authentic relationships. These are all where I have these stories written up on Substack, and there is an opportunity to, of course, chat and really voice your opinions as well on those readings. We already launched our first survey, and the last survey had about 100 Black professionals who participated, where we're asking real questions and really trying to get to the root of what is the current level of our Black experience in the workplace and creating more of a visual and storytelling that can really walk you through what your other peers have said. So like example, I ask a couple of questions where it's just like, how are you feeling at work in terms of belonging, in terms of navigation, in terms of promotion. And once we kick off this survey and then we have our report or our engagement, that this is where you can see like, oh, a lot of people here are aligning with what I'm thinking, or this is very surprising to see for everyone else without you having to be in a room and potentially feeling very nervous, right? It's just like you're looking at a report where over 100 people have been surveyed and potentially where your thinking or your experience is actually sitting at the same intersection as other folks as well. So those are the two ways that we are working with Let's Circle Black right now.
So what are the key findings from the survey you did last summer? And to anything surprising?
Yeah. So with the findings, right, I don't think it was anything that I was potentially surprised at. But like the two things, right? The first, and I think these marry really well, is that the first is, I ensured that within the survey that I wasn't just surveying folks that I knew. Like these were not just my friends. Like I canvassed LinkedIn. I went into different LinkedIn, Facebook groups to ensure that I had a wide breadth of Black professional talent. So we're looking at entry level all the way to like C-suite experience, right? And so within this survey, like some of the questions asked were like, have you been recognized? Have you been promoted? And over half have not been promoted in the last 2 years, right? What's interesting is then 80% of all of the survey respondents still said that they were very interested in still elevating at their current company. They still wanted the next level. They still wanted to be recognized for their achievement. And so what essentially does that tell you, right? Like that is where what we talked about is where the resilience comes in, right? There's still that level of grit and resilience that Black professionals still do have because they know what they deserve and they want to get that. Versus, I won't speak for other groups, but when you think about it from like more of a simple standpoint, you're like, oh, I'm not getting what I want. But 80% of respondents said they still want what they came here for, right? So that just shows that the talent is there, the grit is there, the interest is there. Potentially the systems aren't set up to ensure that they get there, right? And that's what we need to ensure we highlight, because it's not that there is a talent issue. It's not so much that you're dealing with a group that isn't motivated. The systems aren't set up to actually show that they can get to the same level as their other peers. So that was a very interesting finding because, of course, you'd want to see that, if you see something that is not aligning with you, you decide to move on. But in terms of this, like, I think I've always, and when you research or you read up, I've always known that Black professionals are folks who are highly motivated, highly resilient. And honestly, as Denzel said, I'm leaving here with something, right?
As you described that, it's like we invested, essentially. So it's not just that, hey, those people, maybe they've not been promoted because they are not invested and they just haven't cared. Like, we actively invested. That's why we're here. And we're going to keep being here, right?
Yeah.
And give us that promotion. Yeah.
And it's a good or bad thing, right?
True.
Because we're extending our services, we're extending our skill, right? And sometimes it could be to the detriment because you're
Yes.
giving so much of your energy out and hoping that you get something in return. But you don't know. You don't know if ever that return is coming. But because you're just so invested, it's what you want.
And you did this last summer. So obviously, the new administration early last year, different environment now compared to like a couple years ago. So I wonder if you think that impacted the type of responses you got. Did you get anything that just being in the environment that we're in now? Obviously, a lot of companies are pulling back from the initiatives. I wonder if you got a sense that sort of came up in any way of flavor in some of the responses you got.
It absolutely did. That actually was one of the questions that I asked.
Okay.
One of the questions I asked, and it's the survey was launched right at the tail start of when
The tail start.
when the impact changes started to take effect. So one of the
Okay.
questions I did want to ask is, has your company pulled back on any DEI initiatives or programs? And
Okay.
what I saw was that either a lot of them either blatantly or it was just more of a quiet exit. So they
Quiet
don't
exits.
talk about it enough or
Yeah.
they're not investing in those programs in such a way as they used to. So
Yeah.
it showed that yes, it was, and it was quick, right? Like it was just, so this is not what we're going to invest in anymore. This is not what we're interested in. Or like, this is just not something we're going to spend a lot of time on, and wanted to understand how did that make people feel. And the responses that I got there was just like, well, these were programs where people felt like they were right. They were able to connect with like-minded individuals. They were able to then have relationships in terms of mentorship or sponsorship, or it kind of changed their outlook on the company because a lot of the targets that they had for attaining underrepresented talent or working with more underrepresented groups have now just quietly stopped. And that probably for some of us were turning points of why we wanted to partner or work with this company at all. So a lot of the responses were also reflective of, do I'm not sure if I align with where I am anymore because of how they've changed their directive. And so, to your question, it was a question that I asked, and then it was something that I saw like, this is really the changes that companies have implemented had really bad implications for the employees, the Black professionals, because it's just like, well, probably this was all performative. And this wasn't a real investment in my career, in my growth, and in equity. And so it just changed how people thought about where they were currently employed and where they can kind of take their talents.
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways, it sort of reflected what the true values of these companies are. For me, I think even as I think about my first job, which was like KPMG in New York, and just along the way, those resource groups for me has been one way to find mentorship. That's probably the biggest like benefit. I mean, sometimes they do like social fun events, but I think the biggest one for me is like, oh, this person is a partner. Oh wow, this person, like, it's possible. You could be a partner one day. You could be a managing director one day. Like, that's awesome. Like, I want to be like that person. Or what have they done to get to where they are, and how can I do those things? And how can I learn from them? So I mean, whether you're Black or minority or non-minority, all of us need some type of mentors. And all the leaders of any big company today, even if you're a CEO of a big company, you still have some mentors. Maybe in your board, you have some level of that. And I just feel like one of the things that we will miss out on, a lot of us will miss out on, not having those spaces anymore, is having that chance to have those mentors. It's still possible. There's just an easy way to bring those people together and for you to get access. So now, obviously, a lot of the work is just on you now to go out there and find some people. So what I do now, like if I'm in like any kind of presentation and stuff, somebody come present, but oh, this person's cool. I write your name down and try to reach out afterwards. But yes, it's just like you just have to put in the work now. So still on this topic of DI programs in general, do you think those, as I mentioned, right? Yes, they provided us a platform or a way to get together and to get those mentorship and sponsorships. But do you think we still need those programs today? I just want to get your thoughts on this.
Yes, I would say yes,
Okay.
absolutely. But they need to be more focused, equity forward, right? No more like, I wouldn't say any like diversity theater, nothing performative. Like honestly, I don't think we need more panels. I don't think, like the month celebrations, I don't really think that either. Like we need like programs that are truly designed to create an actual playing field. And so like programs that I've always absolutely respected, like the MLT, SEO, like we are doing the thing. We're not just talking about the thing, right? They have numbers and stats to actually prove it. Like, we are going to connect you and we are going to ensure that you have the same opportunities that would have been probably more difficult for you to
Yeah.
get previously because of access or what have you. And so for me, that means like providing the tools, providing the resources, the guidance that really close that gap, and mentorship that leads to sponsorship. Like, we talk about mentorship a lot, and mentorship is great, but you need sponsorship, like who is going to literally pull you and take you to the next level. And that's what's important. Like, what are clear pathways to leadership? This is when I think about DEI programs and what they should look like today. It's maybe no longer, right, just DEI. Is equity forward programs. How can we ensure that we level the playing field, that we minimize that gap, and we provide the actual tools to really put you in spaces where you can succeed at the same level as your peers?
So you mentioned some of the programs that like MLT, which MLT has like they have some programs at the college level.
Yeah.
Obviously, they have programs at the grad school level, business school that we both did, and things like SEO consortium as well. But those are like outside of the corporate setting. Those are helping you get actual opportunities, like actual like jobs. So they're very like tangible. Get goals thereafter, and they have tangible results, like us. But in the corporate setting, though, like what would that look like inside of a company?
Tangible, right? Like, if you actually
Yeah.
tag what is a percentage of Black professionals who have been promoted this cycle, compare that to your other groups, or literally creating pathways to leadership. Like, this is like, what does that look like? And visualizing that, right? It takes this amount of years, this type of project, this type of exposure. This is how you get to leadership. Or if you like actually giving us like the sponsorship, right? Connecting us directly. I think what I've seen with other groups that are different with Black professionals is that, we unfortunately do cling to the people that look like us to build those relationships because it's just more comfortable, and we don't know how we'll be received by other groups, right? And so the unfortunate circumstance of that is just there's not a lot of us. There truly is not a lot of us in those leadership positions. And so then it would behoove us to not want to explore the other leadership that probably looks different than us, to actually help lift as they climb. And so if there are programs that are designated to actually make that easier for us, that would be absolutely helpful, versus just saying like, hey, like, it's an open door policy. And so that's why the pathways and sponsorship is important when you want to think about equity forward programs, because it's just not as easy for us. And we have to be honest in that, because it's just dealing with understanding that there's stereotypes or there's biases, and you don't know who you're going to meet. And so you just kind of believe that maybe I am much better reaching out to someone who is similar to me to have the conversation that I'd like to have.
So correct me if I'm wrong, just to summarize here, it sounds like for you, those type of organizations within a company to be effective, like they need to be more goal oriented. Like, hey, this is to help you get promoted. What are the things you need in order for you to get promoted? And how can we ensure like you have those things? Or if it's promotion, if it's, I don't know, maybe I want to go to a different country, whatever goals that you have within that company to help you grow, having more specific programs that target and helping you achieve those specific goals. Did I hear that correctly in terms of
Look,
how?
I'm a numbers girl, right? If we have numbers, we have data, and that's what we're charting against. That's what clearly creates that equity. And it's also keeping you, and it's also keeping me accountable, right? These are, when we have data and numbers behind it, there's nothing that can be interpreted. And so building programs that are set with data behind it, and of course, once we establish what those numbers are and looking at it year over year, quarter over quarter, how has our Black professionals trended within our org? Women, our first gen, LGBT, really looking, because the experience is different. And so we
Yep.
have to account for that experience to then understand whether our org is as successful as we want it to be. Because of course we want our people to be successful, but we also want our people to be happy. And so that is the kind of leadership that is important to have, that is rooted in numbers. It is an equity focused program across all groups.
So keeping on the focus on the corporate setting here, one of the things you've done with Let's Circle Black, right? I mentioned you have your Substack newsletter, but you write a lot. And some of the topics that you write about are stuff that even for me, I'm like, whoa, I don't think I'm that brave, right? I will not be talking about this on LinkedIn. So to me, it feels like it takes another level. I do feel like I share enough. I share this amount of my experience, both on the personal level, also on the corporate level. But I feel like you take it to a whole other level. So to me, it takes a special kind of bravery to talk about things like what are some of the stuff going on with ICE, right? You talk about social stuff, like when the election was going on, I see a couple posts with Mom Danny in New York. And that type of thing. On a platform like LinkedIn specifically, right? Everybody's there. Like, you're very careful, right? Manager is there. Your coworkers are there. Maybe your boss's boss is there. And we're all connected there. And so a lot of people are not very open to engaging because they don't want to see, they don't want to have somebody else see what they might think about something that might be controversial, like politics, for example, or ICE, and all the different things like that. So, two questions. One is, what gave you the bravery or confidence to be able to freely talk about those type of topics very publicly when you know, I'm sure you have some coworkers on LinkedIn as well, when you know you have coworkers, managers, bosses on a platform like that? And two, is there any line? Like, do you say, okay, here's something I might be personally passionate about, but this is not the one for LinkedIn, or this is not the one for that, or like this is something that, hey, because it impacts, a big population, or impacts, a minority or whoever, so I should speak to it. Like, how do you find that line, if there's a line for you?
Yeah, so let me try to attack both chins. The first is where there's like, where did I find the bravery? And that goes back to why I've always admired Ida B. Wells, right? It's part of what I find important to talk about because honestly, where we're at today, nobody is talking about it, right? Like, literally, our America has shifted and we're all in a very different space than we were a couple of years ago, right? And it's, for my posts, I try to parse it in like different ways, right? Workplace culture, identity, and then because I am a go-to-market strategist, those three as well. So if they fall, and I can make them fall, in those three groups, that's where I'm able to really talk about it. And what's important is just like some of the topics, like being a Black woman in America and seeing how outside of work, this is something that is impacting the way I think, the way I feel. This will also impact how I show up at work too, right? Because yes, we are at work from whatever time we're allotted, but an entire world is happening behind us and it's affecting how we show up on a day to day. And understanding that where we are today, like most organizations are no longer talking about the things, it's important that at least the people who follow me, the people who are connected to me, also know that these are things that I find very important, and for you to know what I find important too. So it's not just that, and I understand LinkedIn is a workplace platform, but it's also a place where people can authentically show up as their true selves and show that above work, I am a human who cares about these things. And when you want to show up as a leader, there's different facets of what a leader is. And so that's why it's important for me to ensure that people do know that I care about the world and what's happening. I care about equity. I care about people who say and do the things that they're going to do. But then also, what does that mean from a business stance? What does that mean for workplace culture? And what does that mean for how you want to show up on a day to day? To your second question on just like, is there a line drawn? Yes. Absolutely, there's a line that's drawn if I cannot at all connect it to workplace culture. If none at all, I can't connect it to go-to-market. Of like your example of Mom Donnie, as a former New Yorker, I will always rep New York. But that post there was just like, this is someone who says what they say and then do what they say. And then when I try to explain to somebody what I do in go-to-market and how we are successful in go-to-market, that's exactly how I want to break that down so that they can understand it less from a data perspective. It's connecting it there, right? Building trust is doing what you say you will do and do it well. I do want to show that I am human and there are things that I care about. And I want people to know that there's multiple facets of me that they should know about as an employee, as a person, as a Black woman.
Amen. Amen and amen to that. I share some of that because even with the recent, obviously with what ICE is doing in Minneapolis and all that stuff, and we all feel differently about it. I'm, as an immigrant myself, and some of the things that they've done, I feel a special connection to some of the things that I feel they're not doing correctly. As I mentioned, I'm not as brave as you in terms of all the stuff, like saying everything that I want to say, but I do, because part of it's like, okay, like obviously I have a large number of people who follow me now, but people have come from different spectrums. But I'm like, you know what? Like, this is very important to me though. So if it rungs you the wrong way, I guess it rungs you the wrong way. As I think about how I share and what I share, I think for me too, it's also very important that, hey, if I want people to also know what's important to me or what I value. And so I guess if that rubs you the wrong way, that means you're not going to follow me anymore, or you're not going to talk to me because, you believe something completely different. And I do, I guess that's what it is. I do definitely think that it's important for people to understand. I don't speak to every topic that come up, but when it comes to, because when it's this podcast, a lot of the things I share on LinkedIn or social media in general, they are all geared towards immigrant professionals, people who are trying to make it in the professional space, especially immigrants. So when topics like that come up, especially when it relates to immigrants, I do feel compelled, if I have a view, to want to speak up or to want to contribute, to add my voice.
I just feel like it's important that we should no longer operate in a space of fear, right? It's where there are topics that you feel that really sit close to your heart, that really do touch on the identities and the intersections of what makes you you, it should be spoken about, because you have folks who probably, right, especially now you're sitting with a platform, who probably do look to you to see how you feel. And if you're brave enough to discuss it, it does show your leadership in such a way where you're shown as fearless enough to know what you bring to the table, but also what is impacting you as you come to the table, right? And it's not just you, it's everyone else. And so having that thought leadership is important because you're showing a level of bravery that not a lot of people have. And let's be for real, right? Like, the ones who sit silent are never the ones that are truly remembered, or they're the ones who probably wish that they had said something.
For someone who's listening now who has all these thoughts that they think might be controversial or not controversial, but how are the thoughts that they would like to express? Like, what's your advice on where to start?
I think, for me, first starting with talking to trusted groups, right? Trusted friends and immediate circle. That's where, of course, you can continue to bounce perspective. But where there are mediums where you feel like you have the support to truly just be you. And I think there are platforms that are now developed for you to be able to do so without feeling guilty, without feeling nervous, without feeling scared, because, it is an opinion that but some people will not share. So think about those platforms where, I'm thinking TikTok, of course, where depending on views, you can meet your friends, or you probably meet your foes. Is where if you do want to build a platform or just build a community, that's very important in a space for you to do so as well. I think instead of thinking about it as like a controversial topic, like, where is it that I can build community for the ideas and the values that I have, and where can I build that community fast? Where is that community? Because there is one, and you'll never find community if you're afraid to say something.
It sounds like the advice there is to start small. Start with something you're familiar with. And then, obviously you can grow and branch out from there. And for me, actually, I started posting about parenting when I started posting on LinkedIn. It was about parenting because I was at the time, we have 2 little kids. And so a lot of my time, a lot of my waking hours is either in doing something related to parenting, or I'm thinking about parenting, I'm thinking about kids. So that occupied a lot of my time and impacted my work, actually. Like, obviously, like, sometimes I have meetings, sometimes I have to go do daycare pickup, I have to do this, do that. Especially if you have little kids in daycare, they get sick a lot, so it impacts the times I can go to work or the meetings I can do if I have to reschedule some meetings and I can't go to work this day because I have to sit back and take care of one of the kids. So I started that. It wasn't anything about careers or immigrants or nothing like that. It was just about parenting. But as you start posting, then you start getting feedback. It's some kind of a feedback loop. And people start reaching out to you. And so for me, at least, that's sort of how I have grown, or how I have over time evolved. It's based on what type of feedback I get, what people DM me about, as we talked about before. Right now, it's a hard time to get jobs. So there's a lot of focus on careers. A lot of times, the number one topic what people reach out to me about is like job. So I pivoted. So I still do share some, thoughts about parenting and such, but not as much anymore. Because now it's very clear to me like a lot of the needs is about jobs and careers and all that stuff. So I think you just got to start from somewhere with something that you feel comfortable with. And if that's something that you want to grow, over time, you're going to get enough feedback from your audience to tailor your messaging. Okay, always my final question. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
the best piece of advice I've ever received. This is learn how to separate parts of your life, right? Work, relationships, personal time, so that, you can truly like fully show up for each. It sounds simple, but I do think it is transformative for the people who know that how to execute it well, right? So before everything, like things would just bleed together, right? I bring work stress into my personal life, or bringing personal anxiety into meetings. Like it's just everything just kind of bled together, and I was never fully present anywhere because I was carrying everything everywhere all at once. And so now I try to be just a little bit more intentional, right? Like when I'm at work, I'm locked in. We're just talking about work. When I'm with the people I love, work does not come with me. We won't, we won't talk about it unless, of course, we're talking Let's Circle Black. So when I'm building Let's Circle Black, that's what we're talking about. Like we're focused on how can we make this more community focused? How can we ensure that there are more people who are engaged? Like how do I ensure that with every part of my life, I am focused on just that and not bleeding other things that can just not have me show up as 100%.
That's good advice. That's something that I'm constantly trying to work on. I feel like I am in the buckets of everything all at once. It's something I actively try to work on in terms of setting boundaries. I always, for one, I always tell myself, like, I want to be in bed by 11, no more than 11. I want to be done. Whatever I'm working on, because our son, our 1-year-old, but like clockwork, every morning he wakes up at 6 o'clock.
Yeah.
So if I go to bed at 1, I know I gotta be out by 6.
Yeah.
But every night I tell myself, you know what? 11, no later than 11. Maybe 10, but no 11. And I never succeed. Because then I'm like, okay, you know what? What if I just do this one more thing at work? Why don't I just do one more thing? Just one more thing.
And then
if I know it's like 1 o'clock. But if I just say, you know what? I'm gonna work till 10, for example, and that's it. Whatever, I'll pick it up tomorrow. But I just have a hard time like putting that line. So I have to I gotta finish it. If I don't finish it, because if I go to bed, I'll be thinking about that thing. So I don't think about it, so I gotta finish it so I can go to bed.
Trust me, I'm like that. I'm like, wait, I should have finished that because now I have to do +1 tomorrow. And how am I going to schedule it?
There is some power in knowing that, hey, and also most of the time, if I'm being honest, like a lot of things, it's not the end of the world, right? Even if that job or that thing you're working on doesn't get done that night, it's not the end of the world. That's the truth. But it's just being in a place where you can mentally draw the line and say, hey, yes, I've given this my best for tonight.
Right.
And tomorrow's another day. Thank you, Dabney, for your time this afternoon. This has been an excellent conversation. And for people who want to learn about Let's Circle Black, how can they get in touch or follow you?
So follow my Substack, and we also have a LinkedIn page, Let's Circle Black, that you can engage with as well. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn, and I can also direct you from there if there's any conversation or questions.
Awesome. Thank you again, Dabney. And for everyone listening, make sure to follow Dabney. And also, if you've not subscribed to the show, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Thanks again for listening. I'm Ahis. Next time, stay unmuted.